Who is Lori Anne Thompson?
Yeah.
You wrote, there's 3 words on your social media: survivor, storyteller, and student. But I want to hear in your own words, who is Lori Anne Thompson?
I am, oh gosh, I think defining yourself is difficult, and I hate boxes, and I don't like to move forward with myself in terms of my credentials. The best and most important thing that I think that I am is a wife and a mom, and I'm happily married to Brad for I think this is our 18th year, and I'm in a blended family with one child I got for free and three I had to labor for. Um, I'm a registered kinesiologist by training and by trade, and I run a small private clinic that I work in part time. And I make a really mean carrot cake. I don't know, cooking is a love and a passion for me. So is eating. So there's that. So is movement, and so is people. I think I'm an introvert by nature, an empath either by trauma training or disposition. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
And I am also a survivor of sexual violence and poly-victimization across a lifespan.
Yeah. Well, I
Hmm.
really wanted you to be able to use your words to say who you are, because I think in the space of people that have had the Venn diagram overlapping with abuse, physical abuse, sexual violence, all the things, it can be easy to become defined by the worst thing.
Hmm.
And who wants that attached to them?
Not me.
Nobody signs up for
Yeah.
that. And
Yeah.
so I just thought I really wanted you to be able to say who you are. And carrot cake on the list makes me really happy. It's humanizing, right? Like, you were a real
Yes,
person.
I am a real person. Yeah.
You are a real human person with
Yeah.
real family
Yes.
who bakes carrot cake and has a real life and
Yes.
isn't just a talking point for people. And I think it's important for people to know that.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Even saying that makes me feel misty.
Mm.
I think that abuse and trauma is so profoundly dehumanizing.
Yeah.
And in many ways, advocacy can be the same,
Mm.
especially public advocacy. And so we become our trauma and we're not.
Mm.
And we become defined by that and we ought not be. And it can be really difficult to reintegrate life before and life after. For me, there was never a time when abuse wasn't part of my narrative. But there was a time where I was had what I would have considered a stable, safe, and relatively happy life, and then I was re-victimized. And so, trying to coagulate back together or integrate back together who you were or thought you were with trauma, and then who you are now, is a complex and interesting process. And I think that's one of the things we're going to talk about.
Yes, absolutely. Not long ago, my friend Janai asked me, and I was like in a particularly angsty time in this spiritual abuse world.
Mm-hmm.
And you see all the things, and it just can get overwhelming. And
Mm-hmm.
my own responses and my own feelings that were like inside of me. And she just said, "Do you like who you are becoming?" And it was such a
Mm-hmm.
powerful question to me. And I think it's really important for us to ask that question for those of us that care about people that have been harmed,
Mm-hmm.
particularly in faith environments, because it's a worthy cause.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But along the way we move and live in these spaces forms us.
Mm-hmm.
And we do have some choices in how we handle entering into and retreating from some of these spaces. And I just wonder, how have you experienced that personally, for better or worse? And what have you learned that you would like to share? This could probably be a whole month of podcasts.
Oh
Who are we
gosh.
becoming? And what have you learned from like living and moving in these spaces? I know you are a thinker and like to think through your answers, so take whatever
Yeah.
time you need to think
No,
about it.
thank you. It's sort of jumping right in, isn't it? The When abuse mars who you are, it fractures it, it deforms it, actually, trauma, abuse. abuse of all sorts, victimization, label it however you want to, whatever seems to fit what has occurred. And it causes you to question who you are, what you thought, what you understood about yourself, the world around you. Your entire worldview is altered and changed. In fact, there's evidence to suggest that your DNA is changed by trauma. And so the expression of who we are is very often highly shattered and fragmented and disordered even. And so the recovery process, and I've talked about this on a couple of spaces that I've been privileged or invited into, is a sort of a three-tiered or three-stepped continuum. And the first step of recovery, and you didn't ask this, but in order to answer it, I got to go through this to get there, is establishing safety and stability. This is from the work of Judith Herman, and is establishing safety and stability in the present. That's physical safety, emotional safety, spiritual safety, um, so that the harm will not continue, whatever that is. And it's not just, can I go in behind my, in my bedroom and lock my door? Am I physically safe? It's also, am I safe on social media? Am I safe emotionally, where I don't have to interact with people I don't know how to interact with yet, or I can't handle interacting with? Am I safe from my offender and the influences in that network? Those sorts of things. And establishing safety and stability. Am I safe for myself?
Yeah.
Is my family safe? Am I safe in my family unit? Because trauma usually upends the entire family unit, and that can take a long time to establish safety and stability. I think that people try to move forward into advocacy, um, in a public way before they're even safe and stable. And I think that's really, a way that we can re-victimize ourselves as survivors. And it certainly is a way that we can destabilize others unintentionally.
Yeah.
And then the second phase of recovery that Dr. Herman talks about is grieving and remembering, mourning, and how mourning is mourning who you were, mourning what's happened, mourning that this is the world that we live in.
Yeah.
Mourning the systems, mourning the structures, mourning the losses, mourning the things that were, the things that weren't, the things that now will never be.
Yeah.
And you can fill in the blank with hundreds, if not thousands, of costs that come, the things that need to be mourned. And oftentimes that's a therapeutic process involving a helper, hopefully somebody who's registered and accountable to an organization. But it can also involve a therapeutic community like the survivor community. And I think we can be good at helping each other grieve, mourn, remember, and validating our experiences. And the goal here is the goal of grieving and remembering is to restore a sense of agency and to diminish the terror and of submission, of having to submit, whether it's spiritually, sexually, physically, financially, you name it. There's all sorts of dominance and submission that come into abuse and tyranny. But the whole goal of grieving and remembering is to name those experiences, to grieve those experiences, to label them, to assign shame as the perpetrator, not the victim. And then also the whole goal of that time frame is actually empowerment, right? Is to take back power from those who stole it and
Yeah.
return it to the person, your own person, your own human, your own dignified uh, individual, and restore that sense of agency that you can actually affect change in your own life. You can do the things of life
Yeah.
and recover. And the third phase of recovery is actually reintegration back into who you were and who you are now. And we often think that mourning will never end. Like it'll always be in this intense therapeutic process, and that's actually not accurate. It feels like that at the time, but mourning does come to an end, and moving into an expansion and deepening of relationships does occur with yourself and with others. And in reintegration, there's new possibilities in life. There's new podcasts.
Yes.
right?
Friendships, new conversations. Yes.
New conversations to be had, new relationships to be formed, and new possibilities in life. And then the fourth thing that Dr. Herman has recently talked about in her new book on truth and repair is justice. And so there's a fourth phase. And I think justice is actually intermingled through all the other phases. And that's where, trauma is a social problem and it needs a social solution.
Oh,
That,
yeah.
yeah. So, and this is part of the social solution.
Yeah.
I would say that we need to be careful not to take our pain and move it rapidly through the phases of recovery and move right into reintegration. Okay, that hurt.
Yes.
Yeah, it sucked. Yeah, and now I have a story to tell. Without having done the deep and hard and wide and vast work of establishing and keeping safety, not
Yeah.
just establishing it once, it's not a one-time deal, and mourning, remembering, and grieving and meaning making,
Yeah.
so that you know who you are and you know how you got there. And that's not to victim blame in any way, but you know the pieces of your own puzzle that made you vulnerable in those situations.
Yeah.
To be human is to be vulnerable, but we all must understand our own vulnerabilities, understanding where we have power and how would we use that. Offenders are people who very often feel very powerless, but they exert extensive power, and they do so in a really destructive way. And so and then we talk about justice and what does justice look like,
Yeah.
and how can we partner with ourselves and other people to bring about justice. And I don't think that we define that well. And as we're moving through the traumatic process, and as I've moved through that traumatic process, and I think this is year 8 for us,
Yeah.
I'm well into reintegration. And I have learned things the very, 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 very hard way.
Yes.
Uh,
Do we have
uh,
to learn it the hard way?
I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
I am a reader, and so as I was moving through what was for us a catastrophic event and series of events that was protracted over a long period of time, I did find in the faith space, in the religious space, there wasn't much in the way of resources
Yeah.
at the time. Now that has gladly changed.
Yeah.
That's only in an 8-year sphere. Jules Woodson took it on the chin first and went forward in that faith sphere. Our events predated her, and so then since then, and Emily Joy and her companion that came forward also exploded that space, and they spread around courage to be shared,
Yeah.
and courage is the best contagion. So I just wanted to frame our conversation in that context,
Yeah.
because
I like that.
I think it's really difficult to talk about where do we want to go from here if we
Mhm.
don't know that there's a foundation that needs to be built in order to even be here in the first place.
Yeah. Lori Anne, have you found that that's a linear process or kind of like the grief thing where they kind of blend in and you move back and forth now and
Mm.
then?
Hmm.
Um,
Um, I'm a pretty linear person, believe it or not, and I have found that that while it's not a linear process, it's a pretty predictable process.
sure.
So if I say I'm in the reintegration phase now and I hit something where I need to grieve and remember, then that would be destabilizing.
We're gonna go back in a little cycle again, but yeah.
Right. But it helps me to be like, okay. I gained ground before. I know the things that will help me gain
Yeah.
stability. I know what grieving and remembering looks like. I can do this and I'm not going to die in the process.
Yeah.
I know, and I can in time, I can process this and reintegrate this new meaning making, this new morning back into who I currently am now. And it doesn't any longer have to consume me. I remember I had one initial conversation with Dr. Diane Langberg years ago, and I can't remember if it was on email. There was only one in person, like sort of virtual conversation. And she said, well, trauma can't be your whole life. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what? What are
What
you
do you
talking
mean?
about? What do you mean? It
It's
is
your
my
whole
whole
life,
life.
Dr. Langberg.
I don't even have a life. This is my whole life, right? I mean, and that she was right, but I didn't have a framework to package what she
Yeah.
was saying.
Yeah.
I was definitely not stable and not safe, and it would stay that way for a long time. So I couldn't even fathom what
Mhm.
she might have meant to not have this be so carnivorous and all-consuming.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder if that something happening to be like, "Oh, I am destabilized. I'm confused now," is just a sign that and feeling activated again. It's like, "Oh, there's
Hmm.
something maybe I still there's something I've worked through a lot. You know, I've done
Yes.
like this certain percentage,
Yes.
but there's this part I didn't see.
Yes.
And this
Yes.
part is activating me." And I think I see a lot of that. I've seen it in myself and a lot of
Mm.
people in the spiritual abuse awareness community, of like a chronic activation, being chronically
Yes.
activated. Oh man, speak to what you
Hmm.
see in that and how
Yeah.
that has been like harmful in your own personal life
Yeah.
and kind of what you have seen and the compassion you have for
Mhm.
others that seem to be getting sucked into being chronically activated.
Right. I knew you were going to go there, and so that's why I knew you were going there.
There we
In
go.
part because you give me some heads up, and so thank you for first of all for going there. I think it's actually a very brave conversation to have. It's a brave question to ask, because the last thing that anybody wants to do with any kind of even the most marginal interest or background in abuse and advocacy is to squelch anyone's voice or give anybody any sort of mandate to follow. However, we can offer information and we can offer our own experience coupled with evidence and allow people to make informed decisions.
Yes.
I think that one of the things that can come out of um, survivorship is a survivor mission, right? We want to meaning make from our suffering, and we want it to mean something. Damn it,
Yes.
right? And so we want it to be redeemed. We want to be able to help other people or give people what we did not have or what we wish we have had in our own circumstances. And we can do that in a way that is deeply destabilizing, deeply activating, and in many ways continually keeps our nervous system aflame. And we can tell ourselves that we're doing good when we're actually doing ourselves harm.
Mm.
And so the very first and most important person to advocate for, to care for, to stabilize, to make meaning with, to commune with, to recover is actually yourself.
Mm.
If
That doesn't feel like the evangelical way.
and roll that together, and I was thinking about this as I was trying to tidy my hair for our conversation today. Um, Roll that together with the misogyny of Christendom, with uh, the living sacrifice, crawling yourself on the altar and like
Yeah.
plunging the knife into your own heart,
Yeah.
so that God can use you and slay, and being witness to your own repeated crucifixion. There is only one sacrificial lamb, and we are not it, right?
Mm.
If for those of us who ascribe to Christendom, we are not Christ. And so the very first and two important things that our Lord said: love your neighbor as you love yourself. Oh, wait a minute, hold on. Love your neighbor as you love
Self.
yourself.
Both.
And so, what does it mean to truly love yourself? And so, many of the people that might be listening to this, and myself, and I think you have kids, but do you have kids?
I do, yes.
Yes,
Mhm.
we're moms, so we know what it looks like to care for somebody who's scared and tired and empty and afraid and unsure of who they are, and that needs a nap or a nourishment or entertainment or play or nicer clothing or because things don't fit or
Yeah.
maybe they need to go to the doctor. We know what it looks like to care for somebody who is vulnerable, and because we do that with our children all the time. And so yeah, we do need to take that same care of ourselves and make sure that we are giving out of a place of safety, stability, and a place of knowing ourselves and the world around us, and we're giving out of the top of what we have, not out of the bottom of what we
Mm.
have.
moving out of one space, did it take away your have you found a way and a rhythm that is more sustainable for you to encourage others while
Mhm.
still being Lori Anne,
Oh, well, the thing
the
about
person that makes cake
yeah.
and drives her
The
kids places?
exactly. I'm still the Thompson taxi. Um, I think that the yes, I have. And when I went to grad school, I can't even remember how much that cost, but it was an enormous amount of money and time and investment. And you want to justify, I learned all this, I paid all this, I need to use this. And ultimately, when I was coming into grad school, I had to decide whether I would go back to my former profession as a kinesiologist or whether I would go full time into advocacy. And I going full time into advocacy looked like staring down a barrel of a gun. I knew I would always be activated. I knew that I knew I'd be good at it, but I knew that it would kill me, like literally. And so I made the decision to return to my former, very holistic, highly embodied profession where I work with the human body, with my clients, and it also has improved my health. I feel like I am a much more vital human being. I can move around again instead of feel like I'm being curled up into a ball in a corner. And it's a way to give. There's all kinds of ways to give back to the universe, good back into the universe. It doesn't always have to look like being involved with highly traumatic, highly activating things. But I do work for a lawyer. I do contract work for an abuse lawyer, and I meet with survivors and do their intake, which means that people who are exploring what their legal options are to deal with their abusive situation. I'm one of the first doors that they come through, and I ask questions that are outlined by the litigator, and that helps prepare the lawyer for meeting with that survivor, but it's also bringing people into the vestibule, out of
Mhm.
victimization and into survivorship. And it helps them to be heard. And listening is an intervention, and listening, as Dr. Judith Herman says, is a radical act. And so I can do that on my own time, and I can schedule it when I have the
Yeah,
the wellspring to give, and it also helps me to feel like I'm still giving back to our survivor community in a way that's sustainable for me.
that's
And
beautiful.
yeah, I love it. I sit with literally the most courageous people on the face of the earth. So for me, it's a beautiful balance. Um, and I feel really confident now, although it was a very difficult decision to make, that I made the right decision.
Yeah. And you don't have to have your name out there in lights saying, here's the one. You get to just
Yeah.
put in a few hours being a listener and
Hmm.
somebody that knows some of the pitfalls and the things to
Yeah.
avoid and handling people in some of the most scary times of their life. And
Yeah.
but you don't have to have all of the arrows being flung
Right.
your way that
Exactly.
happens
Yeah.
in the public advocacy space or the public
Exactly.
like existing
Yeah.
even space.
Yeah.
So
Can I tell you a story that has
yes,
impacted me?
I would love to hear a story
Um,
from you.
I am originally from the east coast of Canada. I'm from a province called Nova Scotia. And as maybe some of your listeners might know, I was poly-victimized as a child. I grew up in a really toxic home. Sexual abuse, alcoholism, mental health issues, incarceration, physical abuse, divorce and separation. I think my ACE score, which is a adverse childhood experience score, can be on from 0 to 10, 10 being the highest, 0 being the lowest. And ever the perfectionist, mine was a 10.
Mm.
Um, and when I was growing up, and we were in a really difficult space, which we always were. There was a case that came forward where a man was um, really mutilating his wife in Nova Scotia. He was abusing her. His name was Billy, and his wife murdered him. He was going to murder her son, and he came home drunk, and she shot him in the pickup truck. And this case, and I remember it being on the news, and then there was sort of books about it, and about this measure of violence. And this woman they didn't want to incarcerate her. She was actually let go at first, and then the Crown eventually did incarcerate her, I think, for 3 months. And when she left that situation and when she left prison, she became a staunch advocate for domestic violence. She spent 10 years traveling the country, the province, the country, and probably in some places the world, discussing domestic violence. And 10 years after her then common law husband was dead, she shot herself.
Mm.
She impacted so many people's lives except her own.
Mm. Wow.
It was profoundly impacting to me when I later revisited the story after my own coming to in my early 40s, re-victimization and coming to, and I thought, yep, that's what we do.
You can see
And
that.
that's what we do. We we pay such a high price to help other people that, I don't want to end up in a car in the Halifax waterfront with my, a hole in my head.
Mm.
I can't end up. That would not be a just outcome, would it? And not
No.
that I wasn't suicidal. I don't mean that. I just mean that's the
You
pathway.
can see the trajectory. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the pathway to consistently ignoring your own need for safety, stability, grieving, mourning, and a reintegration into a life worth living.
Mm-hmm. And that
You know,
listening to stories is traumatic too.
it is.
And sitting with others. I just talked with a mutual friend, Pete Singer. He's
Mm-hmm.
just a gracious person. And he was talking
Mm-hmm.
about how they have realized at Grace the importance of providing care
Mm-hmm.
for everyone involved in the processes that they walk through, investigations and all the things
Mm-hmm.
on all sides of the questioning, the interviewers, the interviewees, because he realized and had seen the studies of people walking around with secondary trauma too after their own, and how devastating that can be.
Devastating.
Yeah.
Right. And so I believe we give lip service to self-care in the advocacy community. I have yet to see that actually bear itself out in any of the circles. I really have yet to see it,
Yeah.
and I've watched carefully. And so I haven't left the advocacy community. Well, that's not true. I have left the advocacy community. I haven't left the survivor community.
Mm. What's the difference, please? That's a very
Mm.
specific use of word, and I think it's important. It is so so important.
A small group of survivors become advocates, and um, they do so, I think, and for some people can do that and do that really, really well. I do think it does require a lot of therapy and a lot of grounding and a lot of process and a lot of self-awareness, uh, and a lot of sort of balancing, because the reality is if you're a survivor, you carry what's called a high allostatic load. So your physiology is amped up
Yeah.
all the time. And so when you deal with trauma, it amps it up some more. And so where you're going to, there has to be that balance between rest, recreation, recovery. And I don't see a lot of people doing a lot of balance. I see a
Mm.
lot of people talking about it, but I don't see a lot of people doing it. So there is a threshold where we step over, where we are no longer just survivors. We become people who are advocates for others. And I think there's a sense in which most survivors think, well, everybody does that, because the people who are become advocates for others are the ones that have perhaps the loudest voices on social media, or are the ones talking to the news, or being quoted, or hosting conferences, etc. The vast majority of survivors don't do that. The vast majority of survivors don't become advocates. The vast majority of survivors go back to their jobs. They they continue on with their lives. They recover and they reintegrate back into society.
And we'll never know their names.
And we will never ever know. And the vast majority of survivors prefer it that way. And so, for it's not that I have seen in the advocacy community the same grasping for power,
Mhm.
the same need for a name, the same desire for a platform that I see in the abusive community.
Mhm.
And that is just not, we cannot bring liberation with oppressive tactics.
Yeah.
And so it's a game I refuse to play.
Oh man, that reminds me. I had just listened to a conversation on the podcast, The Bulletin. Mike Cosper does this podcast generally with Russell Moore. It's a Christianity Today podcast, but Russell Moore was gone. David French was on with him, and they were talking about the recent CPAC conference, which is an American like conservative political
Mm-hmm.
action thing, and that former President Trump had spoken, and he had said, and I'm going to read um, what he said. In 2016, he said, in 2016, I declared, I am your voice. Today, I add, I am your warrior. I am your justice. And for those who have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution.
That was who said that?
That was former President Donald Trump to all these conservative people that have felt marginalized. He's speaking to them. And I thought, Mike and David talked about this and said, isn't it interesting that so many have embraced this idea of I have been wronged, I have not been listened to, and this
Mm-hmm.
person is
Mm-hmm.
going to be like a desire for vindication and
Yes.
retribution where there's a little bit of holy desire for
Mm-hmm.
that justice desire that we have.
Mm-hmm.
But here in the US, we've seen politically that, the most important characterization of our political parties is what we are against,
Mm-hmm.
what we
Right.
hate. And that has
Mm-hmm.
become the most defining thing about American Republicans and American Democrats. And
Mm-hmm.
I do not want that to be how that defines us as believers and followers of Jesus, particularly those who claim to and really do care for those who
Mm-hmm.
have been harmed in their faith communities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I have seen us, myself included, I cannot just say it's out there, sliding towards becoming all about what we are against.
Correct. Yeah.
Have you
Yeah.
seen that? Any
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah. It's really unfortunate. It's also really common. So,
Yeah.
um, so you spoke about a couple things. One, you talked about sort of revenge, and uh, revenge is something that, and I posted this recently on Instagram. Revenge is a feeling or desire for retribution uh, based out of powerlessness, right? So it's all the things you formulate in your mind that you're going to do or you're going to say when you have no capacity to do or say anything. And revenge is a desire that really fades away when you have the capacity to say and do things again. So, so for instance, I'll pay you back. I'll let everybody know all the bad things about you. I'm gonna smear you all over the face of the universe. Well, that becomes like almost a disgusting and vile thing to do when you are free to do it.
Mm.
And for those of us who have done it or do it in the public sphere, I think we tell ourselves we like it. I think we think, oh yeah, this I'm getting him back,
Yeah.
and I'm going to let the world know what a insert adjective individual he is. And what that ends up doing is really centering your life moving forward uh, on your offender as opposed to on yourself. So that's problematic, and it's it's a red flag for me. And I'm being really honest. I'm pretending like you and I are in my study having a cup of tea. It's a red
Yeah.
flag for me when people lead with either their credentials as their identity, or when they lead with their trauma as their identity. Okay. So that's said with love and compassion.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Not judgment. But it always makes me stand back and go, it helps me know where they are. right, in their process, or who they feel they are right now. Because I want to say to you and them, don't you know you're so much more
Mhm.
than your letters? And don't you know you're so much more than what he did to you? Right? You were made to thrive, not just to survive.
Yes.
And so when we define ourselves by what we've accomplished or what's being done to us, then we don't get the opportunity to flourish into the fullness of who we are. And we actually don't even have to define who we are now. We're defined by what happened to us and what we've accomplished. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And so I think as a survivor community, we do need a survivor mission, a survivor agenda. What kind of equality or equal community do we want to cultivate, and what is that going to look like in our lives? Where is it going to be mutuality?
Yeah.
Where does Amy come to my house and we have dinner? You know, where do we have sort of the right of access to each other's beautiful lives? Where can we talk about the good things that are happening in our lives? Where can we cultivate fairness, peace, mutuality, reciprocity, cooperation, equity?
Mhm.
And I think we in the advocacy community we can have a situation where we elevate people into dominance, and then we end up walking beneath them in submission. And there
Mhm.
is no recovery in that paradigm.
Yeah.
There is none, because somebody else always has more power. I'm giving my power away to you. I will submit to what you think, what you feel, etc. And I will define myself by who you say I am.
Mhm.
I am a survivor. I am good because you say I'm good. I'm not good because of my inherent worth as a human being, and so therefore my worth is still put out there for somebody good to say I'm good. We have to
Yeah.
define not only who we are outside of trauma and integrate trauma into that picture, but we also have to define what is our life now going to be about, and that's a
Mm.
costly process.
Yeah. 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 Am I about just looking at the ugly all the time? That does not sound sustainable,
It's not. Yeah, it's not.
or what we've been called to. In that conversation that Mike and David had, Mike Cosper had mentioned this reference to Isaiah chapter 30 verse 15, and this is this is the verse. This is what the sovereign Lord, the Holy One of Israel, says: in repentance and rest is your salvation,
Mm-hmm.
in quietness and trust is your strength. And at the end of that verse, but you will have none of it.
Exactly.
Verse 16,
Exactly.
you said, no, I will flee on horses, therefore you will flee. It's that wanting to do the thing.
Yeah.
Rest is, you have to work for it. It has to be an intentional thing.
Yeah.
Quietness and rest, that does
Yeah.
not sound like holy work, but
Yeah.
you're arguing that it is.
I'm confident that it is.
Yeah.
I'm confident it's holy work. Yeah. If in I When I left social media, when I left Twitter, I thought nobody would ever talk to me again.
Here we are.
um, and I thought, okay, if nobody talks to me again, am I going to be okay? And I decided, yeah, I'm going to be okay. You know, I, if I've done all I can do in this space, and there's never more for me to do, then okay. But I've actually found that, like people like you who reach out, and I've said yes to everybody, because it comes in little driggles and drabs, things that I can handle. Um, has been deeply rewarding, and I feel like when people like you and others come, they come to a person who doesn't have it all together, but has something to give out of an overflow
Mhm.
as opposed to a deficit.
And fellow students who say, look at this thing I've learned from somebody else.
Yeah.
For Jesus. It's not pointing to Lori Anne.
No.
It's pointing to like, and I want to share, I want everyone to have access to the thing. And then we can
Yeah.
be together, like you said, not you here and somebody else here, but like, the holding hands,
Yeah.
you just different places on the path sometimes and be like, look at this
Sure.
beautiful view I found right here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Look
And
at
it
this
offers some
beautiful
hope.
spot. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look
Yeah.
at this place where we could pull off the side of the path and
Yeah.
just look
Yeah.
together.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
like
I think
that.
that's a vision of what do we want to be
Yeah.
as opposed to what do we want to destroy.
Yeah. How do we avoid becoming what we're against, Lorianne?
I think it's hard.
Yeah.
I think it's really hard. I think that if we do not do our own deep work, we will become the exact thing that we say we survived.
Are there red flags to look for?
Massive red flags. Would you like a list?
I would like however many on the list you want to give.
I'm a list girl too.
I love lists.
Anyone who tells you what to do,
Mm,
anyone who gives advice, rather than information. You said, "Well, I give advice. I don't give advice. I give information."
the
Anyone
difference
who,
is the
okay,
agency is on the listener.
that's right.
Yeah.
Right. So, so people in your situation have done X, Y, or Z, and you may have other options available to you. These are your
Yeah.
options. You're going to have to make a decision. I have found at points in my journey, I wanted somebody to decide for me. The very,
Yeah.
very, very wise people did not.
But in the end, when someone decides for us and something goes badly, we just are mad at them again
Right.
and ourselves. Yeah.
Right. Yes, because we trusted them to be our our guidance when in fact we actually empowerment is developing our own internal guidance. Um, Anybody who seems busier than is humanly possible. Anybody who talks about valuing their health and well-being but does not demonstrate the practices of health and well-being, like staying
Mm,
connected to their important attachments, whether that's a partner or, their family, their chosen family or their family of origin, whatever. Anybody who travels all the time and does not seem to be rooted and grounded in anything,
it's
but
hard to
then
be
says that,
known. It's hard
yeah,
to be known if you are
yeah,
always traveling.
right. It's hard to be known by the people. If you're talking about your relationships more than doing your relationships, that's a problem. I said earlier in the podcast, anyone who leads with their credentials is always, always suspect to me. So it's just always like, uh-huh.
You're gonna have
Yeah.
to do a lot to like make up for that with Lorianne, is what you're saying. If you start with that, there's gonna have to be something else that redeems you later on. That's not
You're
what's
gonna,
gonna impress
yeah,
you. Yeah.
yeah, no, because I highly value education,
Mhm.
um, and academia. I highly value it, but I think it can show that, see, I know more than you know.
Mhm.
Mm. And then, in fact, as a survivor, and as somebody who wants to help empower other people, it's not about what I know. It's actually about what you know
Mhm.
and what information we can share, to help you get what you need to move forward.
Yeah.
I don't need you to look up to me. I want us to move along together.
Mhm.
Right. Um, Anybody who asks for money, um, I know it sounds really stupid, but anybody who asks for money or makes you feel like you can't say no to them, for whatever reason.
Mhm.
Anybody when you question them, does not give you a proper answer.
Yeah, no clear answer.
Yeah, skirts it, questions the question, somehow makes you feel like the question isn't valid. Anybody who doesn't seem to be doing their own work, and anybody who seems to pretend or give off airs that they are somehow less than human,
Mhm.
and anybody who makes you take a seat, uh, Anybody who doesn't defer to your own humanity.
Yeah.
We are meant to defer to each other,
And
you know.
I'm hearing you say these red flags, and I'm gonna say, like, for my own self, this is a red flag. These are red flags I need to think about if I'm waving them myself in someone else's face.
I
And
know.
a red flag in my own life that says, "Oh, did I feel like I needed to impose my help on someone?"
Right,
Right?
right. Yeah.
Um, did I neglect all the things I needed to do, really,
Mhm.
to point out how wrong people were on social media?
Right, right.
I
Oh,
just talked to Becky Castle Miller
oh, she's
this for
wonderful.
this week's, and she's doing her PhD on
Mhm.
emotions in Luke and theology. And
Mhm.
we had a
Mhm.
wonderful conversation. And I had asked her some things about discipleship, things that people maybe get wrong. And she said that being over involved can be a trauma response.
Mhm.
It blew my mind, Lori
Yes.
Ann.
Yes.
This happens
Yes.
so much in communities of people that have felt harmed, have seen
Yes.
the light, have found a little bit of humor, not humor, oh, I probably found humor, but some healing. And now they're
Yeah.
like, I am going to do all the things.
All the things. And I'm going to be everywhere. Anybody who's everywhere. If you're
Yes.
everywhere, you can't be somewhere. Yeah.
It spoke to me because I'm the
Yeah.
person that thinks you will love me if I show up and do all the things. And
Yeah.
that is not Amy at her most healthy.
No, and it's also not loving your neighbor as you love yourself.
So, mhm.
Yeah. Imposing demands on your own frame that you would not consider healthy for anybody else.
Yeah. What has a
So,
sustainable rhythm looked like for you? So as we wrap up this conversation,
mhm,
just I know that your life is different than other people's,
mhm,
but what has
mhm,
been sustainable for you,
mhm,
life-giving, and like investing in others, investing in
mhm,
yourself, and just
mhm.
seeing life and cultivating beauty and goodness?
Yeah. Thank you for asking. Um, the people I have admired the most are the people who have become beautiful despite the brutal. Right? And I, I, those people are my heroes, and um, some of them you know their name of, and some of we don't. And I have decided through all of my own research that I can't die young because I have children who don't need to be motherless, and I have a spouse who would be devastated if I was not present.
Mhm.
And the first and most important thing that I do to be beautiful is to take care of my health. And I have learned the very, very hard way that I have to sleep, I have to eat, and I have to move. And that those things are the first thing that have to go into my bucket of well being. And then if there's anything, I mean, and then people have to work. I get that. My spouse is the breadwinner and I work part time. And so I'm able to keep that margin. And I understand that that's an extraordinarily privileged place to
Yeah.
be. But that said, I work part time. Um, and then I have also found through trial and error, I can do approximately one, maybe two of these kinds of things um, a month.
Mhm. Yeah.
Today they happen to be in the same day. I met with somebody before I met with you,
Mhm.
but and that's as much. That's the pace of what I can handle, and that I can travel about once a quarter. And beyond that, that's how I keep myself well. Um, I don't apologize for it. I used to. I felt for a long time, oh my gosh, I'm not enough. I'm not enough. I'm not enough. I can't do enough. I can't know all the things
Yeah.
I'm supposed to know.
Mhm.
And I just decided, yeah, you know what, you have to let that go. Um, because at the end of your life, in your marginal decade, and my marginal decade, the last decade of our life, and whenever that is, the survivor community will mourn me. But if I miss my husband and my children and myself, if there was never anything for anybody to draw on, including me, then I would have missed the entire point of being here.
Yeah.
So it sounds really simple, but it's simplicity sometimes is the best.
I like it. Thank you. Thank you for, you know, inviting me into your home. for a virtual cup of tea or coffee together. It has been life-giving for me. I am
Mm,
grateful, and I'm grateful for the hard decisions that you made that give permission to others to rethink boundaries as well. Sometimes when
mhm,
somebody goes first in saying
mhm.
no to something,
Yeah,
it makes the rest of us reevaluate whether we need to say yes to all the things, show up to all the
yeah,
things all the time.
yeah,
And you weren't doing it out of needing to serve us.
right.
But isn't that interesting that the overflow of sitting with Jesus in a sustainable, life
Mm,
giving rhythm will just, by its very nature, produce that fruit, right? That other
right.
people are like, that sounds like rest.
Yeah.
That sounds like somewhere I can breathe
Mhm,
and I
mhm.
can be in for the long haul.
Yes. Yeah, it's
And
like
that's
any
what we want to be for. That's
yeah,
the point here. So,
yeah. I think when people have to look at their life and go, "Can I do this forever?" And if the answer is no, then what do you need to change to be able to?
mm,
And to final your thought, you said if when somebody says no, it gives other people permission to say no. And I would submit that there can be no yes if there's no no,
mhm.
right?
It's not a real yes.
Right. If you're compelled to serve out of your survivor mission, your survivor agenda, or because you want to be a do-gooder, which most of us are, then there is no real no. You're actually not consenting to what you're doing, and you're not
That's how I
teaching
feel with
consent.
you in this conversation because I know that you would have said no
Mhm.
if it was not a good idea for you,
Yes. Yeah.
because I've seen you do that. So I feel confident that you would
Mhm.
not have said yes to this
Right.
if you did not have the margin and
You're
it
right.
wasn't a good thing for you at the time.
Right.
It just feels real. It feels real.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Thank you so, so, so much.